This is a PowerPoint on the Outlaws versus the Townsfolk. Starting with Death Knight, you have Ma and Pa. This is just a good card. There's not much to say about it. It's not flashy. It doesn't do a lot of different things. It's just, you drop it on 4, you get 5 corpses. If it lives, you're really happy. If it doesn't live, you're not that upset. It's a great corpse generator. It's a great way to gain extra health in Death Knight. It's an undead, which of course Death Knight has synergies with. It's just all around a pretty solid card. I don't really have much more to say about it than just that, because this video is going to run long since there are a lot more extra slides than usual, so I'm going to skip right through this. Then, for part 2 for Death Knight, you have Reska the Pit Boss. This is one of only 3 classes that actually has a relatively important enough legendary that I would consider it for this video. The other ones are either just, random elementals or, beasts that live in the wilderness. They aren't outlaws or townsfolk, or they just or they're just not a part of this storyline. So I had to get that out of the way. But Reska the Pit Boss, this card is really good. It's really good in Rainbow Death Knight, of course. It has, rainbow runes. It just, as long as you're playing the game, it just discounts itself. It's really powerful, and then you can use it to steal at your opponent's minions, or you can push its Death Rattle with Death Growl. You can resummon it with the Azurite Rat. It's just very, very good. Then, for Demon Hunter, you have Gunslinger Kurtrus. Reno Demon Hunter is weird. It's in a weird state, because every other, Highlander sort of deck has build-around cards. You have your Shutterwalk and your Reno Shaman that you want to build around. You have, of course, Raza in your Raza Freeze. Reno Freeze. But Demon Hunter doesn't really have anything. Demon Hunter is, of course, the second newest class. That is what you would expect. There's nothing to really do with it. But even in Standard, there's just nothing to do with Gunslinger Kurtrus. There's no reason to play a Highlander Demon Hunter. The reason you would play Highlander decks, of course, is to get your incredibly powerful Highlander effects off, like your Raza, like your Theldarin, like your Dino Tamer Brand, things like that, right? But Demon Hunter doesn't have those. Gunslinger Kurtrus isn't a bad card by any means. It just isn't on the same level as almost any other Highlander card, which holds it back significantly. Like I'm saying, it's not one of these Highlander cards that you can really synergize your deck around super well, and you can benefit from it. Like even Theldarin can have a lot of mini little synergistic combos in your Reno Hunter, which we'll get to, but Kurtrus can't really do that. So it holds back Reno Demon Hunter a lot. Of course, Reno Demon Hunter doesn't have a lot of powerful legendaries, from over the years to really synergize with it as well, because they weren't really thinking about this until just recently, I would expect. So there isn't much to do with it, and it's just not great. Is Kurtrus a fine card? Yeah, Kurtrus is fine. If Reno Demon Hunter ever gets support again, you would run Kurtrus, because it's just a pretty good anti-combo card. If you can play it soon enough, it's just pretty good at what it does, but there's just no reason to use it. Then for Druid, you have Ray Straza. Dragon Druid is really good in both formats. It's just, Ray Straza is not the best of the Dragon Druid cards. It's one of the worst, actually, from Showdown of the Badlands. It's not that great. It's fine. It's fine to be getting infinite value, but infinite value hasn't really been a necessary thing in this game in years. If this was released, 4 or 5 years ago, it would probably have been really good. If this was released instead of Elise in Descent of Dragons, it would have been really good. But, it wasn't, so it's just, there's not much to say about it. Like, yes, you can run this card, and you're probably not happy when you play it, but it's not one of those cards that you're just like, oh, it's such a big, powerful build-around card, I need to craft it. You can play almost any Dragon Druid without this. Dragon Druid's not even that good in Standard. In Wild, Reno Druid, you don't need this card. It's kind of just a win more card, in my opinion, because you're kind of just already beating your opponent anyway with your 2 OTKs that are in the deck. You heard it, 2 that are already in the deck. So this extra value kind of just only matters if you didn't draw those, which is, fine, I guess, but it's nothing special. Then for Hunter, there's Theldarin the Lost. Finally, we got to it. Theldarin is a really good card. This is like one of the best Highlander cards ever printed. It does absolutely everything the Hunter wants. It goes face. It clears the board. It benefits from your really good hand buff cards. It does everything. Theldarin just is great. I don't know what more to say about it. Like, so there are some cards that, they're super flashy. They do all these different things. Theldarin does its job, and it does its job amazingly. There's almost no card in the deck that you want to top deck that you want to have in your hand more than Feldurin in Reno Hunter in both formats, because it benefits your Messenger Buzzard, which again, incredibly powerful card. It benefits your Bestial Madness if you're running that. It benefits your Hope of Quel'Thalas if you're running that. It benefits almost every single card that buffs cards in your hand. Like, unless they specify Beast, Feldurin loves it, and it's just really good. You want Feldurin in your opening hand almost all of the time as Reno Hunter, especially in Wild, almost exclusively, because this card wins you matchups. It is so good at what it does. Then for Mage, you have Tathalon Bloodwatcher. I guess. I mean, this card is weird, because on paper, it should be incredibly powerful. There's no way that a card that mana cheats 4, or just reduces the cost of cards in your hand by 4, can't be good at some point. It's just, it doesn't really get there just yet. It had a combo in Wild where if you have, like, your Sorcerer's Apprentice and your Archmage Antonidas in your ETC, you can, like, Bran ETC, then you can play Tathalon Apprentice Archmage for, like, no mana, and then because Apprentice goes over but not less than 1 text of Tathalon, you can make your fireballs cost 0 and you can kill your opponent that way. Is that good? No, but you can do it. This card just, it feels like one of those cards that's gonna be at one point or another, like at one point, you know, maybe not tomorrow, maybe not next month, maybe not next year, but at some point in Hearthstone's history, this card will be broken, because just look at it. Cards that didn't start in your deck cost 4 less. How is that? There's just something about this card is going to break, and we just haven't seen it yet. Then for Paladin, you have Spirit of the Badlands. This card is just like, it's so good at what it does, but what it does doesn't matter. And what that means is, you know, this super high value game plan of Control Paladin, you know, Reno Paladin, I guess I should say, is good. Don't get me wrong. It makes up for it based on, like, a lot of really powerful cards. So this, like, Reno Paladin can actually fight against aggro. It eats aggro completely, and it eats, like, these kind of miracle big minion decks that you see, like your miracle rogues, of course, which is, you know, the big one. You get all these giants. It's pretty decent into Questline Warlock for the same reasons. It's not amazing into Questline Warlock, but it can clear those early giants boards. But Spirit of the Badlands is just like, it's really good. It's really good at what it does. And that is getting you more value from your minions, which is the main win condition of this, Reno Paladin deck. They don't really run any kind of OTKs or anything. They don't run any kind of burn combos like your Reno Priest, anything like that. But this super high, grindy value game plan doesn't really matter in Wild, and it sure doesn't matter in Standard. So it just, like, it's hard. It's hard to tell how good this card is, because it is really good at what it does. It's just what it does doesn't matter. If this card came out like 4 or 5 years ago, it would be one of the best cards ever printed. That's the thing. Like, that's what differentiates this card. If this card came out instead of Finley in Savers of Old Doom, it would have been unnaturally broken, right? But it just, the game has gotten so much faster that a card like this, while being good at what it does, doesn't matter in the context of the rest of the game. Then, for Priest, you have Elise, Badlands Savior. I mean, this is arguably one of the worst Highlander payoff cards ever. I mean, I'm talking about, like, Cruel and Solia Ink Master levels of bad, and those are terrible cards. So, for Elise to be, 8 mana, and a new card to be as bad as those, like, original Highlander cards, that says a lot for how bad this card is. It just doesn't do anything that synergizes with the game plan of Reno Priest in either format. Both Reno Priests want to be hero powering their opponent over and over again. Elise doesn't fit that at all. Elise is kind of like a big deck card, like a big priest card, but you wouldn't play Highlander Big Priest because you can't run Zephyrus. You can't run Raza. Like, why would you ever do that? It doesn't make any sense. And if you're doing that, you can't run copies of your good cards, which is what you want in a deck like that. So Elise just doesn't function. It doesn't really do anything it's supposed to do, and I don't know what they were going for. It doesn't make sense. I don't understand what they were going for with this card. Then for Rogue, you have Drilly the Kid. This card is just... Okay, I think that if random spells were better in Wild, that Excavate Rogue would be decent in Wild. But because random spells are just so bad in Wild, that's what holds it back. I mean, Drilly the Kid is by far the best Excavate card, like, not even within question. Just the fact that it does 3 Excavates for 1 card is unreal. That kind of consolidation of power into 1 card is crazy. It's also a mech, so you can tutor it in Rogue. You can make it cost less. You can do so many different things with this card in Rogue. It's genuinely so good at what it does. It's just, Excavate is really good in Standard. You have the Azurite Scorpion. You get all these, you get 4 spells that cost 1 less for each time you Excavate, but not less than 1. So if you've excavated 8 times, basically, to get 2 Azurite Scorpions, basically everything costs 0. You can keep bouncing the Azurite Scorpion, things like that. And Drilly the Kid, of course, is the main key of what that deck is. The issue is just in Wild, stuff like that doesn't matter. You can just kill your opponent. You can just kill your opponent before this value would ever matter. And random spells aren't very good. If you wanted to have spells that cost 1 less, it's not good for them to be random. Then, Rogue Part 2, you have Velrock, Windblade, and Velrock the Deceiver, of course. This card was really bad on release, because Velrock used to say you have to do 3 cards. Then, it was buffed to be 1 card, and Velrock the Deceiver was really broken, because it's a 3-mana 3/6 with charge. The secondary effect didn't matter, and yet it was still a good secondary effect. You would just have a 3-mana 3/6 with charge that you could buff and then bounce over and over again. It was really powerful, and it gave you a random card that cost 3 less, which again is really good. So this card was just unreal for the short time that it still had 6 health. Then it was nerfed down to a 3/3, and it's still pretty decent in Standard. Not that great in Wild anymore. It was good enough for Wild to be played. That's how crazy it was, because you could play it with Cold Bloods and things like that. But it's just fine in Standard, from my knowledge. You still run it in these Thief decks in Standard, in your Excavate decks in Standard. It's just good in those decks. So it's not like it's a bad card. It's just, man, this card was really broken when it was buffed. Then for Shaman, you have Dr. Holiday. This card is a bit weird, because a lot of people, for the Wild side, underrated this card heavily. It just, on paper, didn't seem like it was good enough to make you want to play a Reno Shaman rather than just a standard duplicate Shudder Shaman. And that could have been true if it were released with 10 mana Reno Lone Ranger, because I think that there's no point to play the Reno Shaman with that card now. But when it came out, of course, Reno Lone Ranger was 8 mana. And Dr. Holiday had 2 attack on its Staff of the 9 Frogs rather than 1, which it has now. So it was nerfed because of Standard. Apparently, if you got Dr. Holiday on turn 4 or 5 in Standard, you were just so significantly more likely to win the game than if you didn't, that it just was unreal. You were dealing 18 damage over 9 turns. Yeah, that doesn't sound like a lot, but it really adds up in Standard without that much healing or without that much just ways to kill your opponent. And then you got these giant frogs, which would beat your opponent in the face. But in Wild, it's fine. It's a fine card. It's definitely not the best card in your Shudderwock Reno Shaman. It's probably in the bottom half, to be honest, especially after the nerf. But this is why I'm thinking I believe that after these most recent nerfs, I believe that regular Shudder Shaman just with duplicates is probably better than Reno, but people haven't really been testing it out. Maybe I'm wrong, but if you have been testing out, let me know down below. I wouldn't be surprised if it was still. I wouldn't be that surprised if it was still better, but I would expect it to be a lot worse, and for the duplicate version to be a little better. Especially when you had cards that came out in Wizarding's Workshop, like your Fairy Tale Forest. That location is so powerful that running 2 of them seems like something you would want to do. But yeah, it's just, obviously Doc Holiday is a great card in Standard. It needed to be nerfed. It was that good, so I can't really fault it for that. Then, for Warlock, you have Tram Conductor Jerry, or Jerry, however you want to pronounce it. I mean, this card is just, it's an okay card. It's not bad by any means, but once you had your Azurite Snake getting nerfed, it just fell off significantly. Excavate Warlock fell off significantly. Of course, you're always running this in any deck that is going to play Excavate Warlock, don't get me wrong, but it's just not that good. It's fine. It's not amazing for Standard, but it's just not amazing. And as time goes on, these slower Warlock decks have just gotten worse and worse and worse, and there's just no way to play this in Standard currently. And if it came out 1 expansion ago and it's currently unplayable, that doesn't bode well for this card. Of course, it's completely worthless and wild, but that's not really what we're talking about here. And it's an unfortunate circumstance. Then for Warrior, you have Boomboss Thogrun. This card was so bad when it came out, and it just didn't even, it counter synergized with Highlander decks to begin with too, which is very weird. Even with the inclusion of Deep Miner Brand. So that's why it was very weird, because Highlander decks originally in Standard would still have the if your deck has no duplicates tagline, not if your deck started with no duplicates. So Boomboss Thogrun would shuffle 3 TNTs into your deck, which completely made your, Bran and Reno worthless in Standard. So you wouldn't play this card. But people just ran duplicates anyway. They just ran duplicates anyway, so you would just draw through your deck, then you would play Bran and Reno, not even caring about the duplicates. Then you would play Thogrun when you already had the value from your 2 legendaries. So what they did is they made it so it shuffles into your opponent's deck, but in the same patch, they made it so that it's started in your deck, not currently in your deck. So it was a completely worthless change. It actually changed absolutely nothing. But it was still a good change because it just punishes your opponents for drawing cards. Why did they do that? I could not tell you. It's one of the most pointless and unnecessary changes in Hearthstone's history. It actually just objectively did not need to happen. I don't know why they did it. I couldn't tell you why they did it. It just makes no sense. I mean, Thogrun is really powerful with, that change, right? Because it shuffles 6 TNT into your opponent's deck after Bran, and then your opponent just gets fucked if they draw cards, which is really toxic, to be honest. More so than bombs, because bombs, don't destroy 3 cards each. So Boomboss Thogrun is destroying 18 cards for your opponent. What? I get that, you could destroy a TNT with a TNT, and that's probably what the reasoning was, right? But, so what? You're still destroying 2 cards with that TNT. Yeah, you lose the other TNT, but who cares? Then, for part 2 of Warrior, you have Deep Miner Brand. Although, the other, I guess Finley doesn't really count as well. Finley is a Excavate card, which would technically make it a Townsfolk, but I don't really want to include Finley because technically in the lore, Finley was raised from an egg by Elise, so it would make Finley an outlaw, but whatever. That's why I didn't want to put Finley. Don't fight me on that. But Deep Miner Brand, he is there to mine Azurite. He is 100% an outlaw. Or, a Bloodrot co-worker. So, and not an outlaw. So he's going to be on this side. Although he is a Highlander card like all the others. I just had to get that out of the way. Bran is just, unreal levels of powerful. Even at 8 mana, it's still really good in Standard. At 6 mana, it's just meta-warping. For Shaman to have this effect, a similar effect to this, they had to play a quest, and then 6 Battlecry minions, and then press the button for 2 mana every turn to get a similar effect to Deep Miner Brand. Warrior just had to run a Highlander deck, which we already know it wasn't a downside because Reno is so powerful, and of course Deep Miner Brand is so powerful, to get it permanently for 6 mana. How did they think that this card would ever be fair in Standard? It obviously wasn't. Shocking no one. Ascalor was in the game when this card was out as well. Shocking absolutely no one this card would be broken when it first came out. So it's just what were they thinking with this card? At 8 mana now in Standard, yeah, it's kind of not that great. It's fine. It's still really good if you can play it. But 8 mana 2/4, just pass your turn is really bad. You just lose the game because of that sometimes, because of the tempo loss. So it is a big detriment to play Deep Miner Brand. In Wild, obviously it's worthless. I mean, Reno Warrior is just completely worthless in Wild. There's just no point to play it. If you're playing an 8 mana legendary like this in Wild, it should be winning you the game, or at least giving you enough tempo to not just instantly lose the game the same turn. And Deep Miner Brand does not do that. Then we have to talk about the neutrals. You have Sheriff Barrelbrim, Reno Lone Ranger, and Flint Firearm are the ones that I want to talk about. Technically, you could have included Martut, the Elemental Legendary, but that card's so terrible I don't even want to talk about it. That's how bad that card is. It's not like these class ones where oh, I have to talk about it because it's per class. That card's horrible, even by standards measurements. It is so bad. Anyway, Obviously, Reno Line Ranger is broken as hell. It was 8 mana, was nerfed to 9 mana, was nerfed to have the no duplicates clause, or started with no duplicates clause because you play it with duplicates, and then it was nerfed to 10 mana. This card was nerfed 3 times, 3 separate nerfs. That's how crazy this card is. It's one of the best cards ever printed. I don't really need to talk about Reno Lone Ranger that much. Everyone and their mother has talked about this card, and it's only 2 expansions old. That's how crazy this card is. But Sheriff Barrelbrim, this card is like really bad. I mean, like, the Badlands Jail, all it does is it puts a minion dormant for 2 turns, and it's a location. So, it's not very good. It's genuinely not very good. It has a pretty hard-to-do condition on turn 4 for a lot of decks as well, have 20 health, so you can't play this card on curve to gain value from that, get the most amount of value from it. So, it's just really bad. Like, Sheriff Barrelbrim is, I don't know. I don't know if this card is, like, okay in Standard. Just reading it makes me think that this card wouldn't even be good in Standard. I have never seen it in Standard. When people talk about their Standard decks and also Standard decks, I never see Sheriff Barrelbrim, so I don't think it's very good there. I might be wrong, but can you fault me? And then, like, in Wild, like, this card is atrocious. People thought you could play it in, like, Even Warlock, which is the only deck you would ever be able to play a card like this, and it's just so bad you can't even do it there. But then you get the Flint Firearm. This card is really good. It's just good. There's not much to say about it. If you're playing like a low draw kind of deck that you just need the 30th card, like an Even Death Knight, or maybe even like an Even Druid, right? You can just run this card. It doesn't take much. It's just it's a River Croc that gives you a card. So at worst, it's just a River Croc that gives you like a 6/6 with lifesteal. That has tradable. That's fine. That's not terrible. At best, it gives you multiple rehydrates over and over again, so you can heal to full, you can keep your mana, you can keep spamming cards over and over again with like Quick Draw, or Pocket Sand, or Heat Wave, all these really cheap Quick Draw cards that you can get your mana back. You can have like Dehydrates, you can have the one that's Quick Draw or combo to gain a coin to, just keep the cycle going. This card can give you so much value, it can give you boards, it can do a lot of things. Just for a 2-mana 2/3 slot. That's not bad. It's not like an amazing card. It's just pretty good. And that's all you need sometimes. You just need a pretty good card sometimes to win the game. Especially if you are like these not very high draw decks, like I'm talking about, your Even Death Knight is especially one of those. It's just a pretty good slot. It takes up 1 card to sometimes win you the game if you need it. Sometimes get you out of bad situations. Sometimes it's just all you need. But yeah, that's going to be it for me. If you enjoyed, make sure to like, comment, and subscribe. Like I said, the way that I classify the Townsfolk and the Outlaws is I wasn't really talking about any of the weirdo like elementals or monsters in the Outlands, but it's mostly just the people or the cards that specify like if they are Highlander, like your Spirit of the Badlands and your Raystraza. But yeah, you can enter the 2 giveaways, one by commenting your favorite Hearthstone card down below and subscribing, or one by becoming a member. And thank you to RF for becoming a member. And I'll see you guys next time.
Shadows are rising again, darker than they've ever been. It's evil.